Watching at home to the Thursday, March 11th, Town of Webster Board Workshop. We have 4 agenda items tonight, so we'll get started right away. And Ron, your last name again? Sem, right. And Ron is here from Paul Smith. I'm sorry. Ron is here from Choice Lighting and Electric, is that correct?
Plug-in stations. Paul
Plug-in
is
stations.
from Choice Lighting.
Gotcha.
Not here.
All right. And you're going to do a presentation, and we'll have a discussion about installing an electric car charging system at the Town Hall campus here.
Yep.
So,
All right, well, Tom, thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. I'll do my best to keep it brief and just so that we can leave some time for Q&A. Again, my name is Ron Semp. I'm with Plug-in Stations. Our company is headquartered in the Albany area, but we do work all over upstate and downstate New York and across the Northeast. We've been installing electric vehicle charging infrastructure and equipment since 2011. I've heard somebody say they've been installing charging stations since before it was cool. So I like that. So we've been doing it for a while. We've installed well over 1,000 charging ports in across New York. So that's a little bit about our company. What I'd like to do tonight is basically make the case for why municipalities like Webster ought to install charging stations in their towns and villages. First, I'd like to try to make the case that electric vehicles are here to stay. They've gone mainstream. It's not a little niche group of drivers anymore. If you pay attention to any of the car ads on TV, you'll see probably close to half the ads you see on TV are for electric vehicles. To make the point, Chevy is moving their entire lineup of light and medium duty vehicles to all electric within the next 10 to 12 years. Ford is following suit, and a lot of the European car manufacturers have even a more aggressive timeline than that. So we're going to continue to see deployment of electric vehicles across all segments, all types, all shapes and sizes of vehicles. So the idea here is to get ahead of that and get some of the stations in the ground now while there's a significant amount of rebate and subsidy support from various program sponsors. So reason, why should a municipality install electric vehicle charging stations? There's a couple of reasons. Primarily to provide a resource for your residents and visitors, to attract them to the town park or municipal buildings. In this case, in some cases, to attract EV drivers to downtown and village areas, to local businesses and restaurants. The typical EV driver right now earns twice the income of other vehicle owners. So they'll spend money, they have money, and they will come to your municipality and spend money in the local businesses. In addition, there's certainly environmental benefits to encouraging EV adoption. So if you install charging resources in your town, you're encouraging the residents to buy an electric vehicle, and it can coincide with any sustainability or climate goals that you might have in your town. The other big reasons to do this and do it now is, like I mentioned before, is there's a lot of free money out there from state government and utilities to pay for the stations. I just want to highlight a project quickly that we did. It's not really similar to Webster. It's more of a tourist destination, but we just finished a project that I'm really proud of in Lake Placid. Basically what they did, they installed it, as opposed to installing a station in a municipal building lot like this, they installed it in a public parking area, which was really great for them. They saw usage right away, and they're generating a little bit of revenue from the stations to pay for those spots that they took up with the stations. They were able to collect about $16,000 in grants from NYSERDA, and we helped them, plug-in stations helped them from top to bottom with the install of the stations. So the big, sort of the big motivating factor, I guess, right now is, like I mentioned before, is all the incentives that you can get to install electric vehicle charging stations. So the first being RG&E is paying for 90% of any of the electrical infrastructure that needs to go into the ground in order to bring power to the charging sites. That can be thousands and thousands of dollars that you will get from RG&E. On top of that, which is really unique, it's not very often that you'll find utility incentives and NYSERDA incentives have the ability to be stacked on top of each other. So right now, you can get the electrical infrastructure paid for by RG&E and the station hardware paid for by NYSERDA. So there's very little out of pocket for the town. There are some ongoing operating costs aside from the electricity that you dispense. There's some network fees and things like that, but that's relatively minimal. There's also NYSERDA, other NYSERDA programs out there for other types of high-speed charging. And then, obviously, it's not applicable here, but if there are businesses that are looking to install chargers, there's federal and state tax credits as well. So that said, I told you I'd keep it really high level, and I'm hoping that there's questions. If not, I can sort of get into some more details, but does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask now? If not, I can kind of talk about some other things.
What's the total
Are you-
installation cost?
So your total install cost, it averages around $5,000 per charging port for the electrical work. And you can figure your charging station hardware is around $7,000, but that can vary depending on the manufacturer.
Do you know that we already have one at our recreation center?
I do not. Do you know
Yeah.
which type of station it is?
I do not, but also I believe there are two in the village municipal parking lot behind Village Hall.
Right.
Okay. As I drove in here, I see this as a great opportunity, this parking area. Just today with all of the people at the playground, and I imagine once Little League gets going, there'll be a lot of people here. I think this would be a great spot, not only to serve anybody coming in to visit the municipal buildings, but I think it would get more use from people visiting the park and the baseball fields.
How long does the usual charge take?
So with the level 2 charging, you get about 25 miles of range for every hour that the car is plugged in.
Because when we put the one at the recreation center, our thoughts of putting it here was that people don't generally spend that much time in town hall. I do see your point about the playgrounds, and certainly think that that's valid. How do most municipalities handle the cost of the actual charge? Are they giving it away?
That's shifting. When I first started doing this, most municipalities were giving it away for free as a benefit to their residents and visitors. They're slowly shifting towards a pay-for-use model where they want to cover their cost of electricity plus the cost of their annual network fees. So I would say half the municipalities I've been working with recently have decided to charge for the use of the stations.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to come to that at some point.
And quite frankly, electric vehicle drivers expect to pay. They're not, I mean, free charging is a bonus, but it's not a deterrent. Having to pay for use of the station as long as the price is reasonable and has parity with fuel, it's not going to deter the driver from plugging in.
And I think the non-EV drivers don't want to pay for the charge for the EV drivers in their taxes. So
And
it
that's-
goes both ways.
Yeah. Yeah, we find that in workplace settings too, where it has caused workplace issues where if the employer gives EV drivers free charging, other employees want them to pay for their gasoline. So I would encourage anybody who installs a station to charge for charging unless there's a use case that really it's not appropriate. But at this point, for municipal parking area, I generally say the rule of thumb is whatever your kilowatt hour charges from your utility, double that, and that generally covers your costs.
Bill, what were you going to ask?
Patty,
Or
yes, same
did
question.
Patty cover it, did you?
And we did receive rebate money
Yeah,
for
and
that.
it's funny, the only, and I
Of
knew,
$8,000.
just coincidentally.
Yeah.
I didn't know this when we booked you, honestly, that Glenn and Chris from the Parks and Rec Department were going to be here. So my question was, do you have any idea how many people utilize the one over there?
It gets used pretty fairly, regular. Last night, actually, when I left, there was a car that was sitting on there, and I noticed it probably a good half hour, 45 minutes before I left.
And do you know, are we giving it away right now?
It's through, I think it's EV Connect, I think is the label that's on the actual charger.
Do you know if the person who was using it was using our facilities? Or were they just sitting in their car?
There was nobody in it. There were two people that were out. Looked like it was a family, a mother and a husband, and a mother and a father. There were two kids playing in the field.
Okay.
So my guess is they were there. They were physically inside. If I had to guess, it would have been them. But I've seen a lot of people pull in, get out with their dog, go for a walk, put
Yeah.
the car in the charger, and
Well, and not for nothing, and we had to put something on the agenda to post, and we said the town hall campus here, installation here. Off the top of my head, I don't know if really that's the appropriate place to put it if we end up going forward with that. Parks, I can understand people going to a park and they're gonna spend an hour or two at the park, like the playgrounds you said here and stuff. So I guess I never thought about the Ridge Field and stuff. But, yeah,
Something to
Interesting.
consider is so when you're considering EV charging, you should be looking into the future. And I'm already seeing several municipalities moving some of their fleet to electric to save operating costs, fuel, and maintenance. Whether you're ready for that now or not, I don't know. But looking in the crystal ball, the town of Webster will be moving that direction for your smaller vehicles, whether it's 5 years, 7 years down the road.
Yeah.
It's going to make sense financially to do that. So I would encourage you to consider putting some level of equipment here. If RG&E is paying for it, if NYSERDA is paying for it, I would encourage you to do it now rather than 5 years down the road when nobody's going to be paying for it except for your taxpayers.
There's definitely merit. And I guess I have one other. I'll admit my ignorance. I don't have an electric car, so I'm. If you own an electric car, do you have something permanent usually in your garage that you're charging that thing?
Typically, yes. The model here is charge at home overnight and then top off throughout the day. So
that's-
you
so
go
this
to
is-
go to work or you go shopping, go take your kids to the Little League game.
Right.
You're really just topping off. So when I mentioned you get 25 miles of range for every hour that you're plugged in, if somebody drives into Rochester and back from work and comes to the game, they're topping off in an hour and a half and they're full again before they move on to their next stop.
Okay, and that's like, because obviously, when you say it's 25 miles for each hour that they charge, you almost worry about a loitering type of thing, you know what I mean? Like.
You can create pricing
but
policies
it's-
that will encourage turnover, and you can charge, a certain rate for the first hour or the first 2 hours that the individual is charging, and then you can ratchet that rate up as time goes on if you want that parking space to flip and be used. So there's a lot of flexibility with your pricing policies.
The only last question I have, and it's probably impossible for you to answer.
I'll take a
How
stab
about
at it.
that for a preface, huh? At least in our lifetimes, we've watched, gas stations, the only major change I can think to gas stations and what we put in the ground when they come and put it in is that they used to have leaded gas, they don't anymore, right? I mean, they used to have leaded and well, so the obsolescence over the last 50 years of gas, I mean, they've come up with different types of fuel and whatever, but I get it. We go and let's say we put in 15 of these things at our town facilities, parks and this and that, and then as the industry starts to move forward, and I agree with you, it probably will be electric cars by 2030. What happens if this station doesn't match anymore what they need to do
Right, so
to
So-
charge the cars that they're putting out in 2027?
the stations themselves, or the hardware inside of it of the stations are pretty basic. The plug configuration, there was several years ago, there was sort of the Betamax versus VHS situation, and that's starting to, we're starting to coalesce around one configuration. Any level 2 charger that we put in for you would be compatible with any vehicle currently, and I don't see a reason that manufacturers would move away from that. There doesn't seem to be any reason to. And any other upgrades that the station would need could be handled through the software. So all of the stations are connected through a cell signal to the cloud, and any updates, just like your phone,
Right.
would be handled through the network.
And that's that network fees you described earlier?
Yes.
Okay.
I have one more question. You mentioned level 2. Were you talking about a level 2 charger?
Yeah, I didn't want to get into it for time's sake, but there's 3 different types of charging. There's level 1 charging, which you basically plugged into an outlet on the wall. Level 2 charging, which is probably the most appropriate for a municipal situation like this, where you get the 25 miles of range for every hour. And then there's DC fast charging. And that's sort of an emergency fast charging along highways and things like that. So that's to address the range anxiety that we hear about with electric vehicles that will essentially charge a vehicle in a half an hour, 45 minutes from zero. But that's not necessary in a suburban environment like this.
Interestingly, this was a topic of conversation at the Conservation Board Monday night.
Come on.
Yeah, we were talking about electric cars and charging, and come the day when everything is an electric vehicle, where's all the electricity going to come from?
Thank you.
That's a challenge that the utilities are working through. There's a whole lot of excess capacity on those non-peak hours, so really they just need to manage those times in August when electricity is at its peak. And we're working through that, and utilities, that's on their radar, and they're coming up with solutions.
They'll have to.
Hey, Bill, you're sure that Patty asked all the questions you had?
Yes, you did.
Really?
Yep.
And Ron, I got good news for
Sorry,
you.
Bill.
You got our attention because we are at 18 minutes.
Wow,
We don't slam down the curtain and give you the hook at 15 if there's robust questions and conversation going
Well,
on. So we'll follow up.
Great.
And I will tell you this, I'd love, and I take it we don't have this data of how many cars come to the one that we have. The one in the village, we don't have any control over, so I don't know if the village has any. Those are municipal ones, it's not a private business that has them
I
there?
think there's a
Right.
couple there.
Yeah.
EV
You
Connect
don't
should be able to
suppose
give
the village is
you
gonna have
that data.
are they?
You should have a dashboard, somebody's got to log in somewhere, and
There
you should be able to
a
see
way
that.
to be able to track how many.
Yeah, and I
people
get that, look, the supply demand right now, if we were gonna do this and we could do it for not a lot of money because of all the rebates and whatever, you're doing it for the future. It's not for the demand that's there now.
Well, and some of it's
Right.
for the future next year. I mean,
And that's,
Yeah.
right,
you know.
yes, right, yep. And, well, and we've seen, Paul's not here tonight, but NYSERDA, and I'm very familiar, they're, 90% of the electric lines coming from RG&E, NYSERDA, you said that these are 7,000 a unit, and NYSERDA's doing 4,000 a unit?
NYSERD is doing 8,000 for a dual port unit, and the cost of the station is, figure $7,000. So your surplus can be applied to your annual network charges.
That's
or
the
things like that.
8,000 that we just got.
That's what we just received, yes.
All right,
All right.
Ron,
there-
thanks.
I appreciate.
Oh,
One last question.
Yeah.
Is there any limit to how many NYSERDA will reimburse per municipality?
It's $80,000 per year, per customer.
Per year? Okay,
So that's
And they're-
10 dual port stations per year.
yeah.
so
okay.
2 cars can pull up to one of these stations? Mm-hmm. 2 trains. Okay. Wow, thanks, Ron.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity,
Yeah,
and
no, and we'll
we'll be in touch.
We will be in touch, and I want Chris and Glenn to know, you didn't get robbed of 5 minutes now that it's 5:50. We'll give you your full 15 minutes, all right?
We'll try to turn some back.
But next up on the agenda, Glenn Morrell and Chris Bilo are here from the Parks and Rec Department to discuss the pond restoration project at the Webster Arboretum.
So, yeah, so the topic, or what we want to go over tonight, is just some of the thoughts and where we are in regards to
You
the.
may need to come up.
Are you good?
I think there isn't a,
Yep.
oh,
So basically, what we're looking at doing is trying to improve the overall health of the pond that's located at the Arboretum. One of the things as we look at that pond in regards to its current health is obviously with the depth of that pond, the algae growth, especially during the middle of the summer to late summer, really is becoming not very, attractive, and really doesn't add to the, that feature in that setting. So what we're looking at doing is trying to keep the pond as natural of a setting as we can, and still remove the sediment, the soil, the clay that's deposited on the bottom of that pond. The least intrusive way to do that is actually with, I guess it would be considered a hydraulic removal. Basically, they'll go in and they remove the sediment via a suction pump, more or less. Divers actually do it underwater. They'll suck it out. They'll actually send it to an area that's sort of a containment area where the sediment can have a chance to dry, the water can seep back out. As you look at that pond, and I'll let Glenn get into maybe a little more of the technical piece from that piece, or from that part, but the pond itself, it's been 25 years that there's really been a buildup on the bottom of that, on the bottom of that feature. And it really shows now, especially as we get into the summer months. You can go down there July and into August, and that's really just, the pond is really just coated over with the algae growth because of the shallowness of it. So we've been working with and talking with Webster Arboretum Association, which has been really sort of to our benefit. Glenn has developed a very nice rapport with that organization. We met with them in the fall, early in the fall, and we've had some additional discussions. And through those discussions, the Arboretum Association is actually willing to fund the project fully, so it won't come out of the town budget. The Arboretum is willing to take care of all the costs for the project. We'll sort of serve as, I guess, what we call project managers for it, in regards to the day and, the on-site activities, et cetera. So for us, it's really a situation where we can get the benefits, and the Arboretum can get the benefits of having that pond depth restored, which will improve its overall health. And for us, from a budget standpoint, obviously it's a benefit because the Arboretum Association is willing to contribute to that fully.
What's the depth of the pond?
I'll let Glenn go into some of the technical detail.
Now, take this silt away from it.
Pardon me?
The original depth of the pond.
Original, actually, the company came out and sent a diver last October, to survey what presently is there as far as a organic matter silt sediment layer. And the diver spent about 2 hours in the water in October. He had his rubber suit on. But he estimated 3 to 4 feet of sediment had accumulated at that pond. Now, again, the pond is 25 plus years old. So that sediment didn't all come downstream from just erosion or anything. It's a combination of a little bit of a silt and that type of material flowing in, but really a lot of it was the decaying algae and plant growth, which grows and then dies, settles to the bottom, and because when a pond becomes anaerobic, there's not enough oxygen to break down that organic matter. It just keeps on building up, building up, building up. So the average, once the operation is complete, hope to gain that 3-4 feet, and we should have probably at the deepest, maybe 8 feet of water in some of the deeper ends. So how that will benefit overall, anytime that you have deep water, it ends up being a little cooler in temperature, and with that, it makes some aquatic life or plants not thrive as well. But also it gives us a larger bank of potential oxygenated water. So to help support whatever fish happen to show up. We don't stock the pond or anything, but whatever happened to flow through. We do have plans after the task is complete is to add a shallow aerating fountain. There is already electric in
Right.
place to do that. And because the water will be flowing downstream where we place it, it actually will help keep the O2 levels up so that the algae and the plant growth will, let's say, not be as prolific.
Those
So,
things work
and
very
again,
well.
when the, and even in the heat of the summer, when the water flow does subside and there's not as much supply to that pond, because we've increased the overall volume, it doesn't leak. It pretty much holds the water pretty well. But because we've increased our volume of water and then adding the aeration, again, not only the fountain will be an aesthetic, but it'll add O2 to the water to keep that, even though the water may be stagnant, we'll have O2 go into that water. And there
There's
is groundwater coming in.
Dye packets that you can put.
Pardon me?
I put dye packets in my pond.
Yep.
So it doesn't allow the sun to penetrate. Do that annually, that works extremely well.
Okay,
But the aeration that you're talking about, that's the way to go.
right. And I think we've seen it too, as you drive by North Ponds Park. I mean, last year was a real dry,
Yeah.
was a real dry year, and the drawdown that was there, where the water was clear was where that water was splashing.
Right. Sure.
And,
Yep.
so, but
Absolutely.
that's the plan.
Well, thank you for the early discussions with the Arboretum Association. That's really great news and a wonderful partnership.
Yeah, they've been very obviously cooperative, and their interest is obviously just to, do the same. They want to see that pond healthy, and they want
Sure.
to see from an aesthetic standpoint that it's a viable feature in that park area.
That's fantastic. They've agreed to fund the project too. That's just very thankful for that.
Yeah.
When do you plan to embark upon this?
Ideally, we'd like to do it, I'd say sooner than later.
Yep, I agree.
And there's a couple of reasons. I don't want to go into long detail, but a lot of it obviously still has to do with the amount of usage that's at that park, especially from events, et cetera.
Yep.
If we could do it sooner than later, when we start to get into a busier season, especially with weddings, et cetera.
Yes.
I'd prefer to have that taken care of prior.
I agree.
I think you say sometime in April or May?
Ideally, a lot of it will depend on the vendor and their availability. I know Glenn's had some discussions with them in regards to what their capability is and time frame, but we're hoping that would be about the time frame.
If the Arboretum Association is funding this, we don't have to go out to bid or anything like that from a vendor, do we?
I hope you're looking at Charlie, not me.
What was the question?
I said if
think
the
I know what the
Arboretum
question was.
Association is footing the bill for this, there is no need for us to go to a bid? Or is
I
there?
was just thinking about how nice it is that they're offering to pay for this.
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
I think it
Answers
does.
my, yeah, for me it does.
Yeah, great answer, Charlie.
Got it.
Bill, you were gonna ask that question. Patty's asking all your questions tonight, isn't she? I have a couple of questions. So this Arboretum, Friends of the Arboretum, was that a 501c3 that is,
The Arboretum Association?
yeah?
Yes.
I learned something new today. I did not realize, is there any other 501c3s around that benefit or look to help parks or the rec
Library.
in town?
Well,
I
we-
know library. Oh, I know library. Believe me, I know library.
Friends of Webster Trails.
Friends of
Yeah,
Webster
Friends of
Trails.
Webster Trail.
Drivers, yes, and I know Hal from, okay, all right.
So those are the two that I'd say we are most heavily involved with, is those two organizations. Obviously, both of them are very specific to what they do, which is great. The
Yeah.
Arboretum Association, especially because of the space and what is over there, for Glenn and the parks guys to be able to do that management-wise, and to keep it at the level that it is, would be almost,
Right.
unattainable.
And obviously, then we can get their 990s, or maybe they've supplied them to you, because, and I hate to be a buzzkill, okay? Because I loved what Charlie was doing, saying, hey, we don't have to pay for this, okay? But knowing my Irish luck, it's a $21,000 bill. All of a sudden, this company, which we'll get into later who the company is, that we're not doing a bid process on, suddenly doesn't get paid by the Arboretum because the Arboretum doesn't have the money, which we should be able to corroborate that they do, right? Or they decide not to pay them, it's our park. What liability then do we have in a situation like that at the town?
You would be asking these questions.
I'm
wouldn't you?
sorry, Charlie, I ruin every good time.
No, I don't want to speak, and Charlie, I don't want to
No.
overspeak for you, but they have the Arboretum just, and obviously we'll continue to have these discussions with them, but they have already sort of lined up because of the way that their system is set up for cutting checks. They
Right.
actually offered, if preferred, they'll actually pay for it via credit. So they could work directly with them to take care of it ahead of time. So we don't have to worry about,
I can't
being
understand a
cut.
word you're saying.
Yeah,
sorry. So the Arbor Association can cut checks, and they've offered to do so, or if they prefer, if the vendor prefers, they can actually pay for it via credit.
Well, why wouldn't the vendor just sign a contract with the?
I think that's the best way to go.
Yeah.
They're hiring them,
Right,
let them
we're
take care
not
of it.
involved at all.
It's a gift to the town.
Right.
Just there as managers.
I agree. And by the way, Chris, I want to thank you for talking with your mask on, because there's the proof of why I don't wear a mask on this dais, because it is hard to understand
is.
people.
I understood you, Chris. It's okay.
Well,
I had a hard
Are
time
you
understanding
trying to say
myself.
we have old ears?
No, I'm just saying.
Okay.
I
well,
function with it all
a little
day long.
implication there, I
oh,
think.
yeah, well, yes, you do. You probably understand muffle better than any
The
of us.
only other question I have is that when they start this operation, if you could let me know, because I'd love to see how this works. 'Cause I have a half-acre pond on my property. And I was thinking about doing the dredge thing, because I got the cattails all the way around it. And I think I'd still have to do that, but I'd be very interested in watching this take place.
John, on tape for everybody, you're not going to do anything to the cattails on your pond, right?
What?
You're not going to do anything to the cattails on your pond.
Who said anything about cattails?
This guy, I'll tell you something. Okay, let's just keep it to the park and not your
All right, okay.
property,
Open
okay?
the door, I just walked through it.
Unbelievable. Okay, so do we still, next week, do we still have to do a town board resolution because it's at a park that is a town park?
I don't think so. It's not town, it's really not town business. They're giving a gift.
They're just
They're
giving us an
they're
update of
permitting,
what the Arboretum's going to do.
yeah, it's not.
Hey, I like things simple, Bill. I just,
Let's leave it
want to
there.
make sure that
Yeah.
we're not.
To his point,
you
though,
know.
it is a Webster Park, right?
Yes.
Yes.
But because we're not involved monetarily.
Well, I mean, if you want
funds
to, do a
being expended.
proclamation or resolution saying we accept this wonderful gift, you can do that. But I mean, there's no,
We accept this wonderful gift.
yeah. Is that a motion?
No, I guess we're good. All right. I have one last question. The pond is not a standalone from a standpoint of, there's water that comes into the pond and then there's egress water going out of the pond?
Yes.
So if you create 4 more feet, 3 to 4 more feet at the bottom, will the water come right up to the top still?
We have a spillway at the end of the pond that it's a set level. Water will find its own level, so.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
We're going to be gaining that extra volume.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. Maybe Dolly will do a proclamation next week, just to, we accept this wonderful gift. That would be March 25th.
I would,
Pardon?
if we don't need to do it in advance, I would prefer that we did a proclamation of gratitude after the project is done and bring the Arboretum Association people in.
Yeah. She's right.
Can I tell you something? That's
Again.
why I always look to Patty and not to you, and nothing personal, Bill, to you. That's a great idea.
We're on board.
Okay, move forward. Thanks, everybody.
Glenn,
Thank you very much.
Chris.
Appreciate it.
thanks.
Great project.
And we didn't rip you off at 6:06. You got 16 minutes on that one.
See, I told you I'd give you some back.
Now, Bill, watch us pick up time at the next one,
Oh, okay.
I think. But I'll be interested to see how this goes, because the
You can use some of
next
this stuff now. for the
topic
future.
is a discussion really amongst the board, because nobody's presenting, on opening all the town board meetings to the public as of April 1st, 2021, with COVID safety protocols in place.
I'm in favor.
Thank you, John.
Do we, just so that everyone knows the expectations and the parameters around what those protocols are, do we have an idea of how many people can be in the room with those protocols in place?
In here,
Because that's something we might want to add to the
this is why it's a
announcement.
discussion. Is because where Karen took, was helpful in setting up a draft that she gave to us. Yeah,
Okay,
I think it's in your guys'
packet.
packets.
okay.
And I thought that what Karen put together
Oh,
as
here
a
it is.
draft was pretty darn solid. You know, certainly, you can almost read between the lines of this to say, and I don't even know if you have to read between the lines, we know what the fire marshal says the occupancy is in here. We could do, you know, inside the room, we could go to 50%, you know, we could be conservative, even though the governor is changing things by the minute and opening up. Whatever we decide today, I mean, heck, if the governor keeps opening up like he has been, April 1st is 21 days away. This might be moot in a lot of ways. I mean, he keeps redoing that executive order, Charlie, that is that municipalities can have their public meetings not in attendance. But wouldn't it be funny if in the next 21 days, as we stood here and try to put together how we're gonna do this, he drops it? But even if he did drop it.
Yeah, you've got something in place.
Right.
I
Right,
think
we'd
this
still
is a
wanna
good
do it.
idea.
We wouldn't just open it up like, you know, and put all the chairs back out there and whatever. We would wanna separate them out. Have the staging area outside, with chairs, similar to what Karen has put in there. And, you know, the reality is this, and we know this. You guys know it way better than me, because you've been on the town board for a lot longer than me. Not many people come to these meetings. Now, when you have a controversial issue or whatever, we would have the lead time to that, and Karen already has, where you gotta sign up to come.
Yeah, I wanted to just be sure that all of these protocols and all of these restrictions are put out to the public in advance so that they know in advance of how it's going to work.
Well, and it's funny, Patty, because, I mean,
And I'm sure that Karen's going to put that out on every media page we have.
Well, yeah, it'll go, once you approve it, it will go out tomorrow. But we have redone all the agendas, so all of the protocol will be at the bottom of the agendas, which you should have also in your packet.
Yeah.
So it'll be on every agenda as well.
I would move we adopt this format for all board meetings moving from April 1st forward.
Karen, thank you for your work on that.
Second.
Wait, all right, before you.
is
before
this
you
a
vote-
resolution?
Wait, before you vote, can I comment on a couple of things, or just?
Of course you can, Charlie.
Thank you. I just want you to know, I talked to the assessor today. She likes this idea for the Board of Assessment review hearings. Not that we have a lot of people sitting in,
Right.
but last year we had to do it virtually.
It was
It's really
very-
not
yeah,
satisfactory. I
Yeah.
can tell you, having been counsel to that board for 15-plus years, much better to have the people here present.
Yeah.
You do have, it is an open meeting by law, so that's another problem with doing it virtually, doing that particular kind of a meeting virtually, because it's not a regular thing like these meetings of the planning or zoning boards of appeals. Generally, what happens is the only people that come in are the people that are waiting to be heard next.
Right.
But I would like to expand, if that's okay, expand this format for the Board of Assessment Review too.
Charlie, you know what's funny about that? And this is where, when we put agendas together, we have to be judicious in how many words we put on. This is for all the boards.
Okay.
And I'm glad but here's the thing. I was thinking planning board, I was thinking zoning board of appeals. I've already reached out to Barry, well, now Jamie as the chair, and to Tony Kashani, because I just vet your members. Anybody have a problem with this? Because the first board meeting is April 1st. That's us, right here. All right? But then I think it's Tuesday, April 6th would be ZBA, or is that
Planning board,
right?
planning board, yeah.
So everything I've gotten back from them, they're all cool with it. But I never thought about the assessment board of review.
Well, you
Board
wouldn't,
of
because it's not a
Review.
reg.
What is it, June?
They meet for a limited time from
May
the last
sometime.
Thursday by law, the
Yep.
last Thursday in May until they're done,
Right.
which is usually mid-June, so, yeah.
But to me, this would fall under the auspice of what, Bill, when you say, we're doing it for all the boards. Just so everybody's aware of that, that isn't just for the town board,
I just wanted to
you know.
clarify that as
And
part
I'm
of the
glad
resolution.
you did, because I never thought
Are you
about
getting
the
this
assessment board of
information?
review
Okay.
being under this purview too. And,
Well, the schematic that Karen provided clearly shows this room. So for any meetings that are held in this room.
pretty much, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I wouldn't even limit it to this room, because if there's, for example, if we're next door or something, I don't know, I mean, who knows? You know, there could be a time where there's Board of Assessment review hearings and there's a special hearing meeting in here, for example,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
generally speaking, correct, we have our meetings in here.
And by the way, and it's kind of an offshoot of this, action, reaction of COVID. Before COVID, workshops like this were not televised or
Correct.
live streamed. And now we've been doing it for the last year, and it was floated out there amongst the group in the last week. You think we should keep these being live streamed workshops after we get out of COVID? And everybody seemed to be like, yeah, why not?
Right.
So, not that we have to do a resolution for that or whatever, but, Bill, what Bill just said, are we doing a resolution for this?
He just made the resolution, I mean, why not?
Well, then I'll second it, Bill.
I think
Sally, are you writing this down?
seconded it already.
Oh, John's, you dirty.
I think. I believe so. Sorry to take that away.
No,
from you. I believe that was the case.
As long as you're here.
Dolly.
Okay. So, Councilman Abbott?
Hey, aye.
Cahill?
Aye.
Councilwoman Holly?
Aye.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye. And then that means Karen is gonna go and start marketing it or publicizing it. And it'll be a work in progress because, not for nothing, I wanna talk to the fire marshal and, we will right-size it. And I would just like to think we should be conservative in that at first.
And those guidelines are most likely going to change.
Yes,
As soon as she publishes it, there'll be a change.
probably.
Well, I designed it so that the table configuration stays put for right now, because planning and zoning, we do have members that have health issues. So
Yeah.
until everybody gets vaccinated, and then we can get everybody back up to the main table and bring in more chairs.
Great.
Thanks, Karen.
It'll be evolving.
It's 6:15. We 9 minutes. We picked up some time. We're right back to 6:50. We're right back on schedule. Our fourth and final topic this evening is a discussion on the HVAC bids for the town of Webster facilities. And once again, judicious on how we post the agenda items. This is for service agreements. This is not for us bids for new boilers or new HVAC units. So just to clarify that. I got to tell you, I'd really like to hand this over to Josh Artuzo, and I know she just wants to be here to watch tonight. But Dolores Frazier, you were so involved in this that I'm guessing you may have to answer some questions or present also. And I mean that as a compliment. You did a great job. So I'll hand it over to you, Josh, to...
Thank you, Supervisor. So this effort really began last fall when it was brought to my attention by Dolores that we seem to be spending an exorbitant amount of money on maintenance and repair of the town hall's HVAC equipment.
What was that cost, Josh?
Well, as I'll explain, so when that was brought to my attention, we reached out to the finance department and had them do a financial analysis or a summary of expenditures by department. And it turns out that just for repair and, just for service in 2019, we spent approximately $74,000, which is, obviously was what raised a red flag to Dolores, who prepares our bills. So then, once finance confirmed that amount, we got together and came up with a process for going out to bid in terms of seeing if we could include some of the other town facilities, because at the time, each facility was kind of doing their own thing in regard to hiring and procuring HVAC service, repairs, maintenance, and things of that nature. So like what we're doing with several other things here at the town, we looked at consolidating that effort, and Dolores was instrumental in putting together the framework of the process, which was really three things that we identified as being a need for the town. So that's what was included in our invitation to bid. The first and foremost thing, we don't really have a solid handle on the equipment that we have at each facility and its age and condition. It's a mishmash of, some facilities have newer pieces of equipment, some have old, some are really old and nearing the end of its lifespan. So we thought it was important to have a comprehensive inventory of all of our equipment and assets so that we could begin to plan for future replacement of those big capital purchases. So we asked them, in our bid, we asked them to essentially tell us how much it would be to develop this inventory manual. In basically serial number, age, condition, and a plan for that piece moving forward. So there was that. Then we asked for the hourly rates for basic repair and service calls, during regular business hours, on an emergency basis, and nights and weekends. And finally, we also asked them what type of discount percentage they would be willing to offer us in terms of parts that may become needed in the future. So we, Dolores and I, Dolores again was very instrumental in this whole process. She reached out to some fellow municipalities to see what they have done in the past, just to see, no reason to reinvent the wheel. We wanted to just pick their brains from their experience. So we developed a invitation to bid, basically put it out, I believe, in January, and we received 4 responses. So from that point, we formed a review committee consisting of myself and Dolores, as well as the Director of Finance, Supervisor Flaherty, and Councilman Cahill. And everyone had a chance to review the proposals and the bids. We also brought the companies in for interviews where we would have a chance to ask them some questions about their operation, what their impression was of our facilities and our equipment, and ask them for any feedback from their perspective on our invitation to bid, because it isn't your standard cookie cutter, tell us how much hourly rate. We were really trying to be more comprehensive, and we were really looking for someone with expertise and the ability to plan for the future, because we feel that's pretty important. So again, we received bids from 4 different companies, conducted the interviews. We had a meeting last week, I believe, with the review committee, which brought a good amount of discussion. And I believe you have all of the information in your packet in terms of the reference checks we did on each company, what their prices were, and some of the feedback that we got on each of the companies. So that's just a brief overview of how we got to where we're at. And, myself or Dolores would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, before we ask any questions, I want to thank you both for the yeoman's task that you've done of gathering all of this. And Dolores, thank you so much.
Well, I don't know if I have questions, because I've been involved in it as much as comments, and Josh, you did a wonderful job of kind of summarizing this up. Councilman Cahill asked Josh a question about a minute into Josh's presentation, and we'll work with Councilman Cahill to not ask questions until someone's done with their presentation.
My apologies for
That'll
that.
be part of
No
our
worries.
development of you, Jen.
Thank you.
But I'm glad you did ask, because Josh said that in 2019, the town paid $74,000 for what I'll call maintenance and service calls. We were out of contract. We didn't have a contract with the HVAC service or provider that we were going through. And unfortunately, we really don't have it broken down by how much of that money was just your standard twice a year coming to change filters and whatever that
Right.
Dolores got into this bid, and how much of that 74,000 was really the hourly charge for coming to fix something and whatever.
A good portion of it was that, I think.
Probably.
Yeah, because
But-
we see it when we review the bills each month.
Yeah, and they, the total was $74,000.
Doesn't matter.
And I will say this, we also installed $118,000 that year of what I assume to be new HVAC units. So it's as a comparative year, well, I know we dished out $192,000, 118 in new capital improvements, and I'm sure that will show in the inventories that we'll get from whoever we decide. They'll show, hey, you got a brand spanking new unit in this building from 2019. But that $74,000 in 2019, that's where this bid process really highlights when you look at the first column, and I might have written this down wrong, Josh, you were explaining how robust breaking out the bid. And I wrote down, but I think you said the hourly rate, discount on parts, inventory, but I don't remember you saying what is your annual charge for the maintenance, regular maintenance, 2 times a year, 3 times a year, filters, this and that. And that became problematic for us, not problematic, but when you look at the far left column of the 4, it sticks out like a sore thumb that one of them is extremely low. I'll try to say this as, Dolores became a victim of her own robust bid process. A bid process that was written in such a way that when we interviewed these places, they said, this is not your run-of-the-mill bid. This is pretty, you guys asked us to do some things. They liked it. They were all very complimentary. We showed very professional to these places. Problem is, some didn't understand that breakout, we really wanted to know how much are you charging for the one-time inventory, for going in and doing that assessment, giving us the VIN numbers, the age, the whatever, and then how much is then your annual servicing contract for what is 3 years. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that when we went back to these bidders and said, well, how much of your far left-hand column there is a portion to the one-time inventory? Because they're all saying they're charging that column 3 consecutive years. Do you follow me?
Yep.
So the one that is $20,928, when you look through, if we do a 3-year contract with them, we will be paying, with the escalating percentages, about $65,000 in that contract. So we were asking them, well, how much of that $20,000 the first year is, how much is broken out to the inventory? Because the inventory is a one-time thing, right? Well, the one that is the lowest said, yeah, I misunderstood. I didn't bid in the inventory. So they came back and they gave us what their charge was going to be to do the inventory assessment, a one-time inventory assessment. So at the end of the day, and I always admit my bias that I'm an accountant by trade, you have a situation here where the low bid ends up being essentially about $17,000 or $18,000 over 3 years.
Yep.
All right? Because they're at about $3,500 for the annual maintenance, and then they're at $7,000 that they broke out, or they sent us for how much it would cost for the one-time inventory. The other bids either didn't answer it, or were the way they answered it, you're talking about 3 years with the inventory assessment and their servicing, just basic servicing, not hourly rate for repairs and whatever. They would be somewhere between an aggregate of $50,000 and $65,000 for 3 years. And I go back, the low one is $17,000 or $18,000. And we got into the discussion of, well, we kind of grew as an organization last year where we said, sometimes the lowest is not always the best. We have that, you get what you pay for. So we incorporated in, and however we did it, a best value component to our bid process, right? And I think we just exercised it the first time on the lawn mowing. And I think the way Chris Bilo and Glenn came in and explained it, it was the proper use of the best value to go with the firm we went to that on paper might not have looked like the low bid. But I tried to be very honest with everybody here that, during this process that I 18,000 over 3 years from a reputable company versus 50 to 65,000 from other reputable companies. I don't mean to be a one-trick pony, but I don't think that fits into our best value thing. I don't see how we don't take the low bid. But I'm open-minded. So we're going to go, we've already scheduled on the agenda that we're doing a resolution next week at the regular board meeting to accept one of these bids. And that's why we're here today, because I go back, I mean, we're going to learn from this experience. You almost were our prototype, Dolores, of putting together a very robust bid. And I hope that,
I've changed my mind. I would like to say something.
please do.
What I'd like to say is that when I got involved in this and thought about what was happening under the person who was handling our HVAC prior to, they had said to the town that we're going to come in for $2,800. That's what we're going to charge you for the year. When I started looking at the invoices that they had sent in to us, it actually totaled up to $40-some thousand. But they told us in the beginning that it was going to cost us $2,800 that year. That's what got me kind of nervous and kind of concerned. And I talked to Josh, and finally we had the finance people to do that analysis for us. What my thinking was in the beginning is that since each department over the years had handled their own procurement of HVAC, and the town itself had no idea what was going on in each of these departments relative to that, that the town needed to get a handle on what was going on with HVAC in the town. This is a very expensive proposition, and the town needs to know, and the town needs to understand, what do we do 2 years from now? What are we going to do 5 years from now in highway or in Parks and Rec? We don't have that. We're just going, as my kindergarten teacher used to say, by the seat of our pants on this. So that's why the bid was such as it was, the invitation, because we wanted to get, or at least I, Dolores, wanted to get us from a haphazard way of doing big business to a way of being able to plan and foresee and look into the future. To go from having no knowledge and getting equipment serviced to going back to maybe having no knowledge and getting equipment serviced, I'm not seeing how we are we accomplishing what we want to accomplish? Are we being deliberate about what our intentions are in terms of saving the town money, as well as getting a good product and knowing what's on the table and having some way to move forward? Because one of the ways, I'm going to stop in a minute, but the way I found it, the way I found that is I took the initiative to monitor what was happening in that. Who's going to monitor this? Somebody has to do some monitoring along the way. And nobody was. I'm just going to be perfectly honest with you.
Right.
Nobody was.
Because I think I recall you telling me that there was no controls, even though they were out of contract. There was no internal controls, and they would essentially come in when they wanted to, whether they were called or not. So they basically had an open invitation to come in, which is, your discovery and investigation into this is tremendous. I mean, the initiative that you took to come up with this bid process and all of what you found all along the way, and then to go even further, you took the initiative to call other towns and ask them what they do, which led you to put this together. Is phenomenal. And the point that you're making now is fantastic, because we're going to award a bid at some point, but from a tracking standpoint, we're going to hold them to a contract. But what happened before, even in contract, could potentially happen again.
Absolutely.
Right? So she makes a very, very valid point, and I think
she does, and I will say this though, and I talk about the big picture and how things tick and tie together. I would like to think in the next month, Dolores, we are going to have potentially for the first time, and I could be wrong on this one, maybe, we are going to have somebody in charge of facility management.
I was just gonna go there too.
all right?
That's where my head was going.
Yeah, and somebody talented.
Yes.
And so that person, you know what I always say, Dolores, organizational structure and customer service. We need to commit to that. Well, if this person is hired, and part of their purview underneath this person is facility management, that's their responsibility. Now, how they accomplish it, it's their department, so I'm not going to micromanage that person and tell them how to do it. Whether they work with accounting to have red flags if we all of a sudden are getting bills that are outside the contract or whatever, whether they're working directly with the person we do the bid to, I don't know how they're going to handle that. But I have confidence that the person I think we're going to hire has the talent to manage that. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised, Dolores, if you're part of that equation. But I can't tell you that because you know what? That person needs to kind of get into discovery of a couple months and then suggest, this is what I want to do. And I think I like to have our department heads do what they want to do. The board and or me vetoing it is if it's such a ridiculous idea that we have to veto that. I got to tell you something. I with our department heads, especially, Dolly, haven't vetoed much of what you've suggested. I don't think I vetoed anything. Well, here's a revelation for you. Dolly is our town clerk. She's pretty good at what she does. So if she's making a suggestion that I think we should do this, who's the professional tax collector or town clerk? Her or us as the town board? Her. Now, the town board has to have a wide array of, kind of a jack of all trades. And one of the things that we should have is like common sense to say, geez, Dolly, that doesn't sound like a good idea. And we will. I will, as the supervisor, when the department head suggests something that is crazy. I guess I'm just lucky I haven't had that suggestion to me in the first 15 months as supervisor. And I kind of got a feeling this person we're going to hire, based on the robust process that we went through, vetting candidates and whatever, I feel pretty confident that it'll be handled. It'll be overseen. There'll be no surprises. I'll get off I got the soapbox down here.
Well, I just want to reiterate how thankful I am and the board is, A, you discovering this, B, you taking a deep dive into it, C, putting together this entire process. Because had you not done that, we would be going down the same road. And heaven knows how much we would spend this year. I mean, this was tremendous what you did. And I thank you very, very much for doing that, both of you.
In your comment that Dolores might be working with that person and continuing with this, it's, no good deed goes unpunished, so be careful, Dolores.
I kind of got a feeling, and I know I'm being cryptic, that I bet you Dolores and this person will get together, will get along like peas and carrots. as
I
they say.
agree.
That's the way I get along with Josh.
And actually, part of our hiring process, this collaborative process this year, is we do look at personality and how they'll mesh with, fellow department heads, but also with staff. And I've said many times, I know this sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. Organizational structure is of paramount importance to me. But the only time you got to pull rank is when things go sideways. Because the rest of the time, we're just working together as a team. And when it works, it works.
Yep.
And when teams work well, teams win.
And if there's anyone that's committed to ensuring that this is successful, I would say it's the two people sitting right over here.
Well, and that's
They
where
have skin in the game.
I'm glad, Dolores, you came tonight, and I'm glad that you're, because here's the thing. I feel in a lot of ways like you and I just went through a very similar experience, and I hope we both come out of it the same way. I'm involved in a process of changing a town newspaper that's been around for 30 some odd years. And within that process, you know, there's going to be some growing pains. So after 67 eyes and edits of the last Webster Today, Superintendent of Schools, Carm Gamina, has his name spelled wrong. That's embarrassing, all right? But you know what? I'm not going to sit there and say, wow, you know, we made a mistake and we should just throw the baby out with the bathwater and not move ahead. What we're going to do is learn from that and have a better process later on. And I say this because what you did on this bid process is incredibly robust, and I really wish you could have heard what the contractor said. And I can sense glad handing from a mile away. They were not glad handing. They were literally getting, like, you know, usually we get these very basic spec, low bid, whatever. There was really, we had to think this through. It was a thought through, robust thing. Well, you know what? I want you to do more of these.
Oh, my goodness.
There we go
Well, I'm
again.
just telling you, you know what? And to tell you the truth, I hope we learn from it, because if you're going to be writing this kind of robust, you know, certainly much more so than maybe these bidder contractors and whatever are used to, whatever the next thing we have to go at is, well, then we owe it to you to have maybe 3 sets of eyes look at it and make sure that it's going out in an unequivocal in its interpretation manner. That's just part of learning. And Dolores, as you know, I mean, you're 39 years old. We learn. We continue to learn way after school, right? Right? Glad HR is not here. I can't,
Well, I'll tell you,
Hope he's not watching.
yeah, he probably is. But,
a
you know.
meeting goes by, not one.
Yeah. So, next Thursday, we have slotted a resolution to make a motion to accept one of these bids. Is there
I just-
anything about the-
Something that comes to my mind is a quote by John Glenn, actually, when he was ready to go into space. And he said he wasn't sure how comfortable he was sitting on top of the government's lowest bid. I just think we need to keep that in mind when we talk about value of services and when we're looking at all of this. And I'm sure we'll come to the right decision.
Did he say that?
He did.
He was going into space.
On top of the government's lowest bid.
You had to throw that one out there, didn't you?
Sorry, I
He made it back,
did.
though. He
When
did
I-
make it back, right?
He did.
Okay,
Was it the lowest bid?
yep.
Well, look, it's 6:42 right now. I mean, we can keep this discussion going from a standpoint of, because we have more information about potentially why the bids are so different. And some of it is opinion. In fact, the lowest bid has, we got, what do I want to say, references
Right.
from other municipalities that say they do a great job. Dolores, would it be safe to say that the municipalities that say the lowest bid does a great job, they might be more mature at this point in their, as far as the
They're
age of their units and all that stuff?
They're much farther down the line, because
Right.
when I was talking with them, explaining where we are and what we were trying to do, they said to me, where you are where we were about 5 years ago.
Okay. I never
So-
asked you this question.
So that municipality is in a position now to really guide that company and tell that company what they want done, because they took the time at the beginning of the 5 years to do their due diligence and what they had to put in place.
Right, which is why,
Initially.
yeah, which is essentially what each one of these companies are gonna do for us with respect to identifying the building, all the equipment, so that we can put a plan together. That's my understanding.
Yeah, that's
Well,
in a nutshell.
here's where, and one, I don't know if I never asked you this question, that municipality, did they start working with that company 5 years ago when they were at where we're at in that
I
company?
didn't ask that question.
Pardon?
I didn't ask that question.
That's okay. You know, we're learning, right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing, and here's the, you know, I just, this is gonna sound familiar to you, Councilman Cahill. If we were going out to bid on this hammer, or mallet, or what we call it, for, you know, I said it in an example, this is a car, this is a 2021, whatever make, with all of these, you know, options. And there's dealer one. And dealer two is selling the exact same car. Everything. And one is at $18,000 and one is at $65,000. Which one do you buy the car off of? Look at Charlie. Charlie is like, you know, there's got to be more to this, right? There's no simple answers in the law.
Right.
It's a rhetorical question. Because it's a spec bid, right? As soon as you get into service and you're trying to forecast out what experience are we going to have with these people, that's a tough one. How do you quantify that?
Well, I would agree to a certain percent, but this is essentially, it is kind of spec'd out, because they have to go through every single building, they have to identify every single piece of equipment, the age, the whole 9 yards. They have to service all this equipment. That's what was spec'd out, right? That's what they agreed to.
Mm-hmm.
It's incumbent upon us, as a town, to hold them accountable to that. And I know that one of these companies that bid, we kind of have a history with them to begin with, right?
Right.
Okay, so you want to talk about value, I think, in my opinion, that would disqualify that company right off the get-go. I'm not going to mention any
No
names.
names, thank you.
I'm not going to mention any names, but obviously, I do look at dollars, and there is a significant difference in these dollar amounts at the end of 3 years. And I think it's a responsibility of us, because we've all gotten positive feedback from the municipalities that they have serviced. You kind of have to look at the dollars, in my opinion, right?
Well, and I will say this, if you're going to live by the sword of the money comparison, I need to be fair of dying by the sword on that. Obviously, when I do the 3 years, the difference is 18,000 to 65,000. That's big.
That's huge.
But the reality is, any contract we're in, we can bail out after year one. So we could, I mean, the delta really is in year one, 10 or 11,000 from the low bid with the one-time inventory to now getting up to the, 17 to 20,000. Still a big difference, but it's not as big as 18,000 over 3 years to 65,000. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Dolores, but you had said to me at one point, there was a comfort level that you thought that one of these places might do us better in year one, when we need so much coddling, for lack of better terms, on getting a handle on our inventory. Is
Yes.
that putting words in your mouth?
No, you're not.
Okay.
I do feel that. And the reason I feel that is because we're coming from such a disjointed system, and the town not having a handle as a system on what we have in place and where we need to go. That's my only
Yeah.
point at this time. Then there is one company that I think can do that, and can do that in a flash, and can get us what we need in that first year, and then we can move on. And not only that, but this company has all kinds of contacts and can get us rebates and other types of things, which may impact that cost.
Well,
so to speak.
in Dolores, being fair, and we talked about this in the interviews and in, this, whoever we accept the bid on, and whether we decide to bail out after a year and whatever, this is servicing and an inventory. If the board decides, based on their assessment of the inventory, oh, we gotta go and spend 300 grand next year on new boilers and whatever, whoever we award this bid doesn't get that business. We have to, because we have to go out to bid on that new boiler for $70,000 or whatever. No, they're the incumbent on the service, but that doesn't mean they're gonna win the bid. And now you're back to my example of a car. If the specs for the boiler are X, whatever BTU and this and that, I mean, if one is 100 grand and one is 50 grand, why wouldn't we take the 50 grand? So, and that's, and I'm just saying, I mean, if that company, whichever one gives us the inventory of and says, here's what we think based on the age and this and that, that's got to come back to the board, because now we're talking about capital improvements, and I certainly am an advocate for planning in the future because of the age out or the obsolescence or the useful life, which it doesn't look like we've been doing that before, and that's why we spent $118,000 in 2019, because we had to do it in emergency probably, because it was broke and it was whatever, and $74,000 in service that year. But I think the dysfunctionality, or how do you, how did you describe it? That
Disjointed.
disjointed.
Oh,
See, I'm less inclined to think the disjointment was from the vendor, service
it wasn't.
provider.
No.
It was from the people in the town of Webster government who were assigned to oversee that. And I'm telling you, going into April, we don't have that problem anymore. And I think that needs to be factored into when we look at these bids. There will never be a service provider or any of these bids, the lawn mowing place, the cleaning place, all these things we're doing. I'm never going to have blind faith in them
right.
because I don't work with them every day. You know who I'm going to put my faith in, making sure things work well with those vendors and service providers? Our staff,
And that's why.
our leaders.
And that's why I would advocate on behalf of that new person that may be coming in to have a plan that's in a good shape plan going forward for that person, that you're going to hold that person accountable for the product, the end result.
You got that right. So, it's 6:52. Does anybody want to have any more discussion on this? Because I'm going to be very honest, I got to go pick up a kid from hockey.
I think we've discussed everything we need to.
Yep.
Well, that concludes our town board workshop for March 11th. Dolores,
Thank you
Josh,
so
thank
much.
you.
Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Great
Yes.
work.